Melinda Loveless. When jealousy becomes obsession, and obsession becomes violence, the results can shatter not just individual lives, but entire communities. In the winter of 1992, the small towns of southern Indiana became the stage for a crime so harrowing that it would force America to confront an uncomfortable reality. Teenagers are capable of unimaginable cruelty. At the center of this nightmare stood 16-year-old Melinda Loveless, a girl whose rage over a failed relationship would transform her into an orchestrator of horror. The warning signs had been there for months. In October of 1991, Melinda publicly confronted 12-year-old Shanda Sharer at a school dance, accusing the younger girl of stealing her ex-girlfriend Amanda Hevron. The threat Melinda made that night was explicit and terrifying. She was going to kill Shanda. It wasn't empty, teenage drama. Melinda had even written letters containing explicit threats, yet somehow no intervention came. The anger festered, growing darker with each passing week. On the night of January 10th, 1992, Melinda recruited 3 other teenagers, 17-year-old Lori Tackett, 15-year-old Hope Rippey, and 15-year-old Tony Lawrence, to help execute her plan. They arrived at Shanda's father's house in Jeffersonville with a simple lie. Amanda wanted to meet her at an old abandoned house known as the Witch's Castle. Excited to see the girl she'd been dating, Shanda waited until her father and stepmother were asleep, then snuck out to the waiting car. She had no idea that Melinda was hiding under a blanket in the back seat, holding a knife. What followed was 7 hours of sustained agony. The moment Shanda got in the car, Melinda sprang up, pressing the blade to her throat and interrogating her about the relationship with Amanda. Terrified, Shanda begged for her life, promising she would never see Amanda again. But Melinda's rage couldn't be satisfied with words. She attempted to slit Shanda's throat, but when the knife proved too dull, she stabbed her in the chest instead. Tackett joined in, and together they strangled Shanda with a rope until she lost consciousness. Believing she was dead, they threw her into the trunk and drove back to Tackett's house to celebrate with sodas. But screams from the trunk shattered their illusion. Shanda was still alive. Tackett stabbed her again, and then she and Melinda drove off alone with their victim. They stopped in an isolated location and continued their assault, beating Shanda with a tire iron and sexually assaulting her. When they finally returned to pick up Rippey and Lawrence, they drove to a remote field near Madison. There, they doused Shanda's broken body with gasoline and set her on fire. She was still alive when the flames consumed her. Afterward, the 4 girls went to McDonald's for breakfast, laughing as they compared their sausage biscuits to Shanda's charred remains. On the morning of January 11th, hunters discovered what they initially thought was a mannequin in a field. It was Shanda's body. Tony Lawrence's conscience broke almost immediately, and she confessed to authorities that same evening. Within 24 hours, all 4 girls were in custody. During her trial, Melinda initially blamed Tackett, but facing the death penalty, she accepted a plea deal in January of 1993. She pleaded guilty to murder, arson, and criminal confinement, receiving 60 years in prison. In a remarkable act of forgiveness in 2012, Shanda's mother, Jacque Vaught, donated a dog named Angel to the prison's canine training program, a dog that Melinda herself would train. Vaught later said that seeing Melinda work with the animals made her look like someone almost reborn. Melinda Loveless was released from the Indiana Women's Prison in September of 2019 after serving more than 26 years. She now lives under parole supervision in Kentucky, the last of the 4 perpetrators to regain her freedom, a freedom that 12-year-old Shanda Sharer never got to experience. Sarah Kolb. When jealousy festers in the mind of a teenager, we expect drama. We expect arguments, tears, and perhaps a fistfight in a school hallway. We might even anticipate social media warfare or the silent treatment. But what happens when teenage envy crosses a threshold into something far more sinister? What happens when the jealous girl doesn't just want her rival to disappear from her social circle, but to disappear from existence entirely? And what happens when she actually follows through? Adrianne Reynolds was 16 years old when she transferred to Black Hawk College Outreach Center in East Moline, Illinois in early 2005. She was pretty, friendly, and quickly became popular with the boys at school. For Sarah Kolb, also 16, this attention was intolerable. Adrianne had committed the unforgivable sin of attracting interest from young men Sarah wanted for herself. The resentment built rapidly. Sarah began making threats, telling classmates openly that she was going to kill Adrianne Reynolds. She wrote about it in her journal. She spoke about it at school. The warnings were everywhere. Yet somehow, no adult intervened to stop what was coming. On the afternoon of January 21st, 2005, Sarah invited Adrianne to join her, 17-year-old Corey Gregory, and another friend, Sean McKittrick, for lunch at a Taco Bell in Moline. When they arrived at the restaurant, an argument erupted between Sarah and Adrianne in the parking lot. Sean, uncomfortable with the escalating tension, told Sarah to stop. Her response was chilling. If he didn't like it, he should leave. He did. He walked away, and in doing so, he left Adrianne alone with her killers. What happened next was captured in court testimony that would horrify the community. Sarah began strangling Adrianne in the back seat of her car, while Corey held the girl's arms to prevent her from fighting back. When manual strangulation proved too slow, Corey finished the job with a belt. Adrianne Reynolds died in that parking lot, murdered by classmates over nothing more substantial than teenage jealousy and wounded pride. But Sarah wasn't finished. She and Corey drove Adrianne's body to Sarah's grandparents' farm in Aledo, Illinois, where they attempted to burn it with gasoline. When the fire failed to completely destroy the remains after several hours, they recruited 16-year-old Nathan Godet to help them complete the cover-up. Nathan brought his grandfather's handsaw and dismembered Adrianne's body, removing her head and arms. The three teenagers then went to McDonald's for lunch before disposing of the remains at Black Hawk State Historic Site and the farm. Adrianne's parents reported her missing when she failed to show up for her shift at Checkers restaurant. Days later, Corey Gregory led authorities to the remains. Sarah's trial in October 2005 ended in a mistrial, when one juror refused to convict, believing the prosecution hadn't proven its case beyond reasonable doubt despite overwhelming evidence. At her retrial in February 2006, the jury saw through any lingering doubt. Sarah Kolb was convicted of murder and concealment of a homicide. She received 48 years for murder and 5 years for concealment, a total of 53 years in prison. Today, Sarah Kolb remains incarcerated at Logan Correctional Center in Lincoln, Illinois. She has repeatedly sought sentence reductions, arguing that her sentence violates constitutional protections against sentencing juveniles to what amounts to life in prison. Each appeal has been denied. Courts have consistently held that the original judge properly considered all factors, including her age, when imposing the sentence. Adrianne Reynolds never got the chance to graduate, to fall in love, to build a career, or to experience any of the milestones that define a full life. She was 16, murdered by a classmate whose jealousy proved more powerful than any sense of humanity. Sheila Eddy. When your best friend goes missing, the world expects you to be frantic with worry. You're supposed to help search for her, comfort her parents, and plead on social media for her safe return. But what if your tearful posts and desperate tweets are nothing more than performance art? What if you already know exactly where she is, because you're the one who put her there? And what if, months before she disappeared, you'd already counted down on Twitter, "We really did go on 3. Skylar Neese, Sheila Eddy, and Rachel Shoaf were inseparable throughout their time at University High School in Morgantown, West Virginia. They called themselves best friends, spending countless hours together, sharing secrets, and documenting their friendship on social media. But beneath the surface of teenage camaraderie, something darker was brewing. Sheila and Rachel had grown tired of Skylar. They found her annoying. And so, with the casual cruelty that sometimes defines adolescence taken to its most extreme conclusion, they decided to kill her. On July 5, 2012, just after midnight, Sheila's car pulled up outside the Neese family apartment. Security camera footage captured 16-year-old Skylar climbing out of her bedroom window and getting into the vehicle, her figure disappearing into the summer night. She believed she was going on an adventure with her two best friends. Instead, they drove her across the state line into Pennsylvania to a remote area in Greene County. There, according to Rachel Shoaf's later confession, they told Skylar they'd drive her back home on the count of 3. But when they reached 3, both girls attacked her with kitchen knives they'd hidden in the car. Skylar tried to run. She didn't make it far. They stabbed her to death, then covered her body with branches and debris, leaving her in the woods like discarded trash. The performance that followed was Oscar-worthy. Sheila helped search for Skylar. She comforted Skylar's parents, Mary and Dave Neese. She posted heartfelt messages on social media expressing her hope that Skylar would come home safely. She maintained this charade for 6 months, even as investigators began to suspect the truth. Rachel Shoaf finally cracked in January 2013, confessing everything to authorities and leading them to Skylar's remains. Sheila was arrested shortly after. The motive, when it emerged, was as banal as it was horrifying. According to prosecutors and court documents, Sheila and Rachel killed Skylar because they didn't want to be friends with her anymore. They worried she might reveal that Sheila and Rachel had been sexually involved with each other, and they simply wanted her gone. Rather than ending the friendship like normal people do, they planned her murder, lured her from her home, and executed her in the woods. In January 2014, Sheila Eddy pleaded guilty to murder in the first degree and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Rachel Shoaf, who cooperated with authorities, received 30 years with parole eligibility after 10. During her sentencing, Sheila showed no emotion and offered no explanation for her actions. Dave Neese addressed the court, saying he hoped both girls would spend the rest of their lives in prison, adding that Skylar had to fight for her life and lost. Sheila Eddy is currently incarcerated at Lakin Correctional Center in West Virginia. Her earliest possible parole date is 2028. Skylar Neese's death led to the passage of Skylar's Law in West Virginia, which mandates that Amber Alerts be issued for all missing children, regardless of whether they're believed to have left voluntarily. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of teenage friendship turned deadly, a reminder that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we should fear. Caden McIntosh. When teenagers commit acts of violence, society often searches for explanations in their upbringing, their mental state, or the circumstances that led them astray. We want to understand what transforms a child into someone capable of taking a life. But what happens when a 16-year-old boy accepts an invitation to murder for money that doesn't exist? What happens when he becomes the trigger man in a scheme so bizarre it seems almost fictional? And what happens when the victim is someone who considered his accomplice to be her best friend? Caden McIntosh was 16 years old when Denali Brehmer approached him with an opportunity that would destroy multiple lives. Brehmer explained that a wealthy man named Tyler from Kansas was willing to pay millions of dollars for photographs and videos of a murder. The target had already been selected: 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman, a young woman with developmental disabilities who trusted Brehmer completely and believed they were best friends. Caden agreed to participate, along with 19-year-old Caleb Leyland and 2 other unnamed juveniles. The promise of wealth was intoxicating, and none of them questioned whether this mysterious millionaire actually existed or whether the money would ever materialize. The plan was executed on June 2, 2019. Brehmer and McIntosh lured Cynthia to Thunderbird Falls near Chugiak, Alaska, under the pretense of a hiking trip with friends. Once they reached the banks of the Eklutna River, they bound Cynthia's hands, feet, and mouth with duct tape while Brehmer captured photographs for Sheila. Then Caden McIntosh raised a gun and shot Cynthia Hoffman in the back of the head. She was 19 years old, excited about life, and had trusted the people who brought her to that river. After the shooting, they pushed her body into the Eklutna River and fled the scene. The cover-up was as poorly conceived as the crime itself. McIntosh and Brehmer drove to Polar Bear Park with Cynthia's belongings, then proceeded to Lions Park in Mountain View, where they burned her possessions. They sent text messages from Cynthia's phone to her family, falsely claiming they had dropped her off at the park. But when Cynthia's father, Timothy Hoffman, reported her missing and police began investigating, the fabricated story quickly unraveled. Officers discovered Cynthia's body along the riverbank near Thunderbird Falls Trail on June 4th. The investigation revealed the entire catfishing scheme orchestrated by Darren Shillmiller from Indiana, who had never possessed any wealth and had manipulated teenagers into committing murder for his entertainment. Caden McIntosh was arrested within days of the discovery. Because he was a minor at the time of the murder, his case proceeded differently from those of the adult defendants. While Brehmer and Shillmiller were each sentenced to 99 years in prison, McIntosh's sentencing was delayed for years, as his defense team worked to present evidence of his youth and potential for rehabilitation. In May 2024, facing trial, McIntosh pleaded guilty to one count of murder in the second degree. The plea agreement established a sentencing range of 30 to 85 years, with the final determination left to Judge Andrew Peterson. Cynthia's family attended every hearing, determined to see justice served. Her uncles, Donald and Mike Hoffman, expressed frustration with the lengthy delays, stating simply, "It just needs to be dealt with." They described McIntosh as the main shooter who had years and years to prepare for sentencing while they continued to grieve. As of this writing, Caden McIntosh remains in custody awaiting his final sentencing, scheduled for November 2024. He is the last of the defendants to face judgment for a crime that began with greed, was fueled by manipulation, and ended with a young woman who believed in friendship dying alone by a river, betrayed by the people she trusted most. Karen Severson. When your best friend is murdered, the world expects you to collapse under the weight of grief. We expect sleepless nights, tears that won't stop flowing, and a burning need for justice. We expect you to help the family however you can, maybe even move in to console the grieving mother. But what if that compassion is a performance? What if every tear is rehearsed? What if the person decorating her bedroom walls with photos of the victim and visiting the grave multiple times a week isn't mourning at all, but reliving the thrill of what she's done? Michelle, Missy Avila, and Karen Severson had been best friends since they were 8 years old, growing up together in Arleta, a neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley. But when they reached San Fernando High School, cracks began forming in their friendship. Missy was blossoming into a popular, attractive teenager who drew attention from boys. Karen, by contrast, watched from the sidelines with mounting resentment. The jealousy intensified when Missy began dating a boy named Randy. After Missy ended the relationship because of Randy's constant partying, Karen swooped in and began dating him herself. They even moved into an apartment together. But Karen's paranoia wouldn't rest. She convinced herself that Missy was trying to steal Randy back, despite Missy telling her friend directly that she had no interest in rekindling anything with him. The friendship disintegrated into hostility, culminating in a confrontation in a neighborhood park 10 days before Missy's death, where Karen threatened her with a broken beer bottle. On October 1st, 1985, Missy told her mother Irene that she was going out with another school friend, Laura Doyle. Karen had recruited Laura to help execute a plan born from jealousy and rage. They drove Missy to Colby Canyon in the Angeles National Forest, accompanied by a fourth girl, Eva Chirumbolo. Once there, Karen and Laura accused Missy of sleeping with their boyfriends. They walked her down a path to a creek, where the confrontation turned violent. Karen ripped the hoop earrings from Missy's ears, tearing her flesh. She used a knife to hack off Missy's long, waist-length hair. Then, While the 17-year-old girl was bound and beaten, Karen and Laura held her head down in the shallow stream until she drowned. They placed a 100-pound log, roughly 5 feet long, across her back to keep her submerged. Hikers discovered her body 3 days later, on October 4th. What happened next was a masterclass in deception. Karen immediately inserted herself into the grieving Avila family's life. She attended Missy's funeral. She helped suggest possible suspects. She even moved in with Irene Avila for a time, positioning herself as a surrogate daughter, while the real daughter lay in a grave that Karen herself visited obsessively. She covered her bedroom walls with pictures of Missy and newspaper clippings about the murder. She told Irene that she had seen Missy's ghost. The performance was so convincing that when police finally arrested Karen and Laura in March 1988, nearly 3 years after the murder, after Eva Chirimbolo came forward, Irene couldn't believe it. "I didn't believe the cops," she later said. "I couldn't believe it." In March 1990, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle were convicted of murder in the second degree, and each received sentences of 15 years to life in prison. Karen was released on December 9, 2011, after serving 21 and a half years. But her story didn't end there. She wrote a memoir about the crime, initially attempting to profit from Missy's death until public outrage forced the book to be offered for free. During promotional interviews, she seemed to blame Missy for her own murder, saying, "Not one time did she say she's sorry." The Avila family sued her, and their fight led California to pass Missy's law, requiring publishers who work with convicted criminals to notify victims' families. Karen Severson walks free today, a woman who transformed friendship into betrayal and grief into theater. Tony Fratto. When someone you've known since childhood disappears, the expectation is that you'll join the search parties, help post flyers, and pray for their safe return. You expect sleepless nights, anxiety, and hope that somehow they'll be found alive. But what if, while the entire community is searching desperately for your missing classmate, you already know exactly where she is? What if you put her there yourself? And what if your journals, hidden away in your bedroom, reveal an obsession so consuming that murder became not just possible but inevitable? Michaela "Mickey" Costanzo was everything that 18-year-old Tony Fratto feared. At 16, Mickey was a popular track star at West Wendover High School in Nevada, beautiful and well-liked, with a smile that lit up every room. She had been friends with Cody Patton since childhood, and that familiarity terrified Tony, who was engaged to Cody and consumed by jealousy. In journals that would later be reviewed by prosecutors and reporters, Tony's entries revealed an intense hatred for Mickey, filled with paranoid speculation that her fiancé would leave her for the younger girl. The insecurity wasn't based on reality. Mickey had no romantic interest in Cody, but for Tony, the perceived threat was enough. On March 3, 2011, Mickey left West Wendover High School after track practice and was never seen alive again. While hundreds of community members searched the desert for the missing teenager, Tony and Cody knew she was buried in a shallow grave just 5 miles outside town, near the Utah-Nevada border. They had lured her to that remote location, and there, according to court testimony, Mickey was struck in the head with a shovel and her throat was slit. They buried her body, then drove to the Utah side of Wendover to burn her belongings. Afterward, they washed up and went out for drinks, as though nothing had happened. For 2 months, Tony maintained her silence, while Mickey's family begged for information. Cody was arrested first, and initially, there was no physical evidence linking Tony to the crime. But then came the confession that would seal her fate. In April 2011, Tony made a phone call to Cody that his defense attorney recorded. In that conversation, she admitted using a deadly weapon, participating in the disposal of Mickey's body, and destroying evidence. She provided details about the crime that only someone present could have known. Police arrested her immediately. The conflicting stories that emerged painted a picture of 2 people desperate to shift blame. Cody's attorney presented Tony as the instigator, driven by jealousy documented in her journals. Tony claimed Cody was abusive and had pressured her into participating. The truth likely lies somewhere between their competing narratives. What remains undeniable is that both were present when Mickey died, and both worked together to hide what they'd done. In April 2012, Tony pleaded guilty to murder in the second degree with use of a deadly weapon. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years for the murder conviction and 8 years for the deadly weapon enhancement. Cody received life without parole for his role. Tony has since been denied parole multiple times, most recently in February 2021. Mickey's mother, Cecilia Costanzo, has attended every hearing, ensuring her daughter's voice is heard, even though Mickey can no longer speak for herself. Tony Fratto remains incarcerated in Nevada, serving time for a crime born from jealousy that never needed to exist, having destroyed not only Mickey's future but her own as well. Ash Cooper. When you accidentally harm someone you care about, the natural response is panic, remorse, and an immediate call for help. You dial 911. You try to save them. You hold them and tell them you're sorry as you wait for the ambulance. But what if instead of calling for help, you pulled out your phone and started an Instagram video chat? What if you flipped the camera to show your friend's body, blood pooling on the bathroom floor, and asked not for paramedics but for assistance in disposing of the corpse? And what if the person you killed was just 12 years old, someone who trusted you completely? On November 25, 2022, police in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, received a disturbing 911 call. A woman reported that her daughter had just been on an Instagram video chat with 16-year-old Ash Cooper, who claimed to have killed someone. During the call, Cooper had rotated the camera to show the legs and feet of a person covered in blood, then asked the girl for help cleaning up the scene and getting rid of the body. Officers rushed to the top of the Ridge Trailer Park on Gibson Road, where they spotted a teenager in a black hoodie with green and blue hair running from the back of a mobile home toward nearby woods. Inside the trailer, they found 12-year-old Morgan Connors lying face down on the bathroom floor with a gunshot wound to her back. Bottles of household cleaners, bleach, and blood-soaked towels sat next to her body. Someone had already begun trying to erase what happened. Cooper, who had been charged initially as Joshua Cooper before transitioning, told police it was an accident. The story went like this. Morgan had been visiting to watch Netflix in Cooper's bedroom when she went to use the bathroom. At some point after that, Cooper claimed, the hunting rifle from her father's gun safe accidentally discharged, but the physical evidence contradicted this narrative. A bullet hole was found in the wall near Morgan's body, yet there were no holes in either of the bathroom's 2 doors. The shell casing was recovered in the master bedroom, not where Cooper claimed to have been. Most damning was a text message found on Cooper's phone discussing gun safety, in which Cooper had written that one of the rules her father had burned into our brains was never to point a firearm at someone unless you intend to kill them, and never to assume a gun is unloaded. The case revealed another layer of concerning behavior. During the murder investigation, authorities discovered Cooper had been adjudicated delinquent in an unrelated sexual assault case that occurred before Morgan's death. The victim in that case attended the sentencing hearing and submitted a written impact statement. In March 2024, Cooper, now 18, entered a guilty plea to third-degree murder, possession of an instrument of crime, and tampering with physical evidence. Bucks County Judge Jeffrey Finley sentenced her to 15 to 40 years in state prison, followed by 7 consecutive years of supervised probation. The judge recommended placement in a therapeutic community within the prison system. Cooper's attorney, Paul Lang, referenced his client's difficult upbringing and described the plea as a big step in the healing process. But prosecutors noted that Cooper had never revealed a motive for killing Morgan, leaving her family without answers. Morgan's grandfather, Alan Gold, who had raised her since she was a baby, provided a victim impact statement describing the unbearable pain of losing the girl he considered his daughter. Parents should not have to bury a child, he wrote. The human heart was not designed for such heartbreak. Morgan had dreams of becoming a writer. She was 12 years old when someone she called a friend took those dreams away, then tried to clean up the evidence before asking for help on social media. Ash Cooper will be eligible for parole when she's in her 30s. Morgan Connors will remain forever 12,